day that he's interrogated by Pilate, which
Yeah.
is why the Jews refuse to enter.
So
Yeah.
the interrogation happened on the day of preparation for the Passover. The actual
And the crucifixion as well happened on the same day of preparation for the Passover.
preparation for the no.
So look, the crucifixion
Sabbath.
of Jesus, it's a day of preparation for Passover, and then he's taken to be crucified
So-
at Golgotha.
Yeah, so the day of preparation was a Passover was a Thursday, where they would prepare the sacrifice of the lamb. The next day, when in the temple, Jerusalem temple, the priests would offer the sacrifices. That is the day when Jesus was actually crucified, and then the Sabbath would come.
Yeah. So this is the
before
same day.
No, this is a different day.
So it says, so they took Jesus and carrying the cross himself, he went out to what is called the place of skull.
Yeah.
So this is
So
after
the interrogation. So the Gethsemane,
So Pilate has his words, and the Jews say, crucify him, crucify him.
yeah,
And so then they took Jesus and Jesus carries his own cross
Yeah.
to the place of Golgotha to be
yeah.
crucified.
So
it's on the same day.
They would release a criminal for the Passover, right?
Yeah.
So the interrogation is happening on the day of preparation of the Passover.
That's right.
However, the crucifixion.
It says it was about noon, and he said to the Jews, behold your king. They cried out, take him
No,
away, take him away,
crucify
crucify him. And Pilate said to him, shall I crucify your king? And the chief priest answers, we have no king but Caesar. Then he handed him over to them to be crucified him. So they took Jesus carrying the cross himself, and he went out to what is called the place of skull. And there they crucify him with two others. And
So this is like there's a lot of things happening between this and this. You remember he was sent to Herod.
oh, okay, where is that?
Maybe. So there is a gap between that those two things, right? Which you showed the day of. It's not happening on the same day as
where's the
it
gap?
looks like here, right? It is. This is happening on the day of preparation for the Passover.
And it was noon.
Okay, yeah.
So verse 14 says it was preparation
Yeah.
for the day of Passover, and it was about noon.
Yeah,
And he said to the Jews, behold your king.
yeah.
But in Mark chapter 14, verse 12,
So there is a lot of things happening between that noon and the actual crucifixion, because
so on the first day of the feast unleavened, when they sacrificed the Passover lamb, so Jesus is still alive on the day of preparation for Passover
Yeah.
in Mark's gospel.
yeah,
But in John 19, Jesus is on the cross.
no, on the preparation of the Passover, Jesus is still alive. That's what John also says.
So in John 14, Jesus is giving instructions to the disciples to make preparation to eat the Passover. And then
but the Passover,
then he has the Last Supper.
the Last Supper, which they're having, is not the sacrifice.
So here it says
Passover.
the Lord's Supper.
The
so-
Lord's Supper is the Lord's Supper.
So while they were eating, he took bread and blessed it and said, take this is my body, and this cup, thanks. And he said to them, this is my blood of the covenant, which has been shed for many.
So you get that
So
difference,
it's a
right?
Passover meal, because he said preparation
Yeah,
to make,
so
and then
I'm-
he has the Passover.
So the Passover
As
is
his
not
final
just
supper.
that one meal. The Passover, the
And then he
actual
goes to the
Passover,
garden and prays,
the-
and then he's arrested,
yeah.
and then handed over to
Yeah.
Pontius Pilate eventually,
is-
and then
The
crucified.
Passover feast is celebrated for I think 7 days, but
Yes.
but the sacrifice happened on one particular day. It's not that they fast
Yeah,
for the full 7 days and eat on that.
Yeah.
They keep
So both of
eating.
them say he was crucified, but Mark says he was still alive when John says he was crucified.
Like that's what I'm telling
yeah.
you. That
So you know, John 19 says Jesus is hanging on the cross, but Mark 14 says Jesus is still with his disciples. giving them instructions to make preparation for Passover.
Yeah.
So the
Preparation. So
the
the-
Passover ends up being his last supper or his final meal with the disciples, and then they go to the garden of Gethsemane, and then that's where Jesus prays to the Father
Yeah.
to take this cup away from him.
Yeah.
And then he's arrested, like he's identified by Judas, and then
there is
they
a lot
take him.
of other things, right? He's taken to the high priest, the Caiaphas,
right.
and then he's sent
To
back.
Pilate,
and then
yeah.
a lot of things happen. And
And he's
and
crucified,
that
I
day,
think, 3 o'clock. Mark says about 3 o'clock, was it? Or 12 o'clock.
He died about 3
3, yeah. So he's crucified
at 9.
9, so it's 6 hours, yeah. So Mark says in the morning he's crucified. Well, John seems to say he's crucified in the afternoon or in the evening, because John says it was noon when he was being interrogated by Pilate.
No, that was the previous day. The noon interrogation was the previous
So
day.
when does he have his final meal in John?
With John, the
yeah,
Last Supper, that
yeah.
is, yeah.
So the Last Supper in John is in chapter
That is-
13.
that is not the.
But according to the synoptics, it should be somewhere between chapter like 18 or 17, somewhere between there. Because in 19 he's arrested
Yeah,
and he's like handed over to Pilate.
yeah,
But in the synoptics, Jesus is still alive. Like he has the final meal, and then he's finally arrested and then handed over
yeah,
to be crucified.
yeah.
So like Jesus already has the final meal, the Last Supper, in the synoptics.
Yeah.
But according to you, in John, he hasn't had yet the Last Supper because the day of Passover hasn't yet taken place in John.
That's what I'm telling you. The Passover is not one meal.
Yeah, it lasts for a week.
It
Yeah.
lasts for a week.
So in John, it hasn't yet begun, but in the synoptics, it's begun. So in Mark, it's already started by the time he's arrested by Pilate. So by the time Jesus is in Pilate's court, Passover's already begun in Mark.
Yeah.
But in John, it hasn't yet started when he's in Pilate's court.
So when it's the preparation of the Passover meal, it could also denote the final sacrifice which the priest would do in the temple, which would be considered as the real Passover meal.
So in John 19, has the Passover meal
We can
begun?
ask some Jews about how
Yeah,
they
yeah.
celebrate the
Okay.
Passover.
Maybe
and
next week.
Yeah, that would give a clearer idea. What I think is, so like, if they are celebrating the Passover for 7 days, it's not that they are fasting for 7 days and then they would have one meal. It could be still Passover meal every day. And every day they would remember, to my knowledge, they would remember.
Every day is not Passover, but Passover is like an annual feast that begins
feast.
around about Easter time as well. It coincides with Easter,
Yeah,
roughly.
they have their own calendar.
Yeah. So when it comes to Passover, it's already begun, like in the Gospel of Mark.
Yeah.
But in John chapter 19, it hasn't yet begun.
Why do you say that?
So
it
like
doesn't say that
so like
Passover
it-
has not begun.
So
It's
in
like
John chapter
preparation.
19, it's the day of preparation for Passover when it's in Pilate's court.
Yeah, so not necessarily
Yeah.
it's like pre-7 days.
So
It
you
could be like in those
So
7
in
days.
Mark chapter, so in Mark 15, Jesus is in Pilate's court,
Yeah,
but there Jesus has already eaten the Passover meal,
Yeah.
according to Mark.
yeah.
But according to John, the Passover hasn't yet started when he's in Pilate's, when he's before Pilate.
That's what I'm mentioning. It's the final. And what was referred in John could be the final, sacrifice, which the priests were supposed to make that sacrifice in the temple.
Yeah,
Yeah, that could be the preparation of mentioned in John.
yes.
Yeah.
So then you would have to wait for the priest to make that sacrifice before you can have the Passover meal. But according to Mark, they've already done that.
No, that's what I'm telling you.
Yeah.
It is a series of 7 days, when in the final day they would do that final Passover meal, John, what I believe is John is referring to the final Passover meal, which would be had after the priests would sacrifice in the temple, right? That is why.
But John is saying it's the preparation for Passover.
Yeah,
He's not
preparation.
saying it's the final day of Passover.
Yeah, preparation of Passover would be that 7 days period. It could be any in that 7 days period. That is what I'm trying to
Let's
say.
see. So John 19 verse 14. Yeah, it was preparation day for Passover. And they also, it says in 18 that they, in verse 28, that the Jews refused to enter Pilate's court so that they wouldn't defile themselves,
Yeah,
so that they could eat Passover.
yeah,
So they haven't yet eaten the Passover meal. If they had, then they would have entered Pilate's court. So if it's been like a week
yeah.
in which there's been Passover and
Yeah.
this is the final Passover,
Yeah.
it means they could still enter Pilate's court because they've now eaten the Passover
No,
meal.
but the priests are making preparation for the final Passover day when they
Okay.
would do the sacrifice,
Wow.
and that is where they would have that cleansing where they shouldn't be, meeting up with the body or something like that.
Well, this is just saying that they refused to enter it because they hadn't yet eaten Passover because it was a day of preparation for Passover, rather than like
That is
because
fine
then
with me. I don't see any.
every day would be like day of preparation for Passover. So it wouldn't make sense if that's the final Passover meal. Then it would say like this was the last day of Passover rather than
We
the
can-
day of preparation.
Yeah. Maybe you can look at how the Jews actually celebrate the Passover.
We should have asked Matthew because he was just here.
Yeah.
Do you know Matthew? He's a practicing Jew, so
Maybe they
he
would
has
have
knowledge.
good
Yeah.
insight from what I know.
Okay.
Every day would be the Passover meal where they would, remember their exodus from the land of Egypt and God delivering them from the spirit of death, which would come on any family who did not have the blood.
Yeah, I understand like the Passover hadn't yet taken place, but John refers to the next day as being a special Sabbath. And the reason why he calls it a special Sabbath is because that year Passover coincided with Passover.
Yeah.
The Sabbath coincided with Passover.
Yeah.
So Passover hadn't yet begun, but it was to begin with the start of the Sabbath.
So
But according to
for
Mark,
me,
it had
that's
already
fine.
started.
For me, that's fine. Because on like the body shouldn't be left hanging on the day of Sabbath. That's why they wanted to make sure that they die and then they can. But when they came to Jesus, they recognized that he had already died, and they did not break any of his bones. However, just to make sure that he has really died, they pierce his side. That is when the water and blood gushed out of his side, and even till the last drop. So there was no drop of anything in Jesus' body. So that's like the final thing, and that is like
Just because it says in John he was pierced by his side doesn't mean that historically that's what actually happened. John could be mentioning the spear thrust for either his own theological motives or for apologetic purposes because people were doubting the death of Jesus. And so the spear thrust would be the one thing
So if you're saying
that would remove that doubt
John made up the death of Jesus,
for apologetic reasons
no, if you're saying that,
or to make a theological point of the blood and the water.
No, all that comes later. At that point, you think, why would
So John is the only gospel
John
to
is-
mention the spearing on the side. and John is the last of the 4 Gospels to be written, so it comes very late in time.
That's why, to me, John is the closest disciple to Jesus. He loved Jesus. He's called himself beloved of Jesus and all that.
But John also says many things which the other Gospels do not say.
Yeah.
Which
so
if
he saw a
Jesus-
perspective
yeah.
of Jesus from his closeness with Jesus.
But if John said the things that John says about Jesus, then you would have expected to be in all the other Gospels as well, or emphasized as much as it is in John's Gospel.
Not necessarily. Like if there are 4 friends, one friend would give a closer perspective of one friend than the other 2.
So like the apologist is like when Jesus prays to have the cup removed from him. So in Mark he emphatically says, take this cup or remove this cup away from me. In Matthew he says, if it be possible, take this cup away from me. But in John chapter 12 verse 27, Jesus says, I will not pray to be saved from the hour, but it is for this very reason that I've come. So not only Jesus says he won't pray, but the prayer where he says to take this cup away from him is absent or missing in John.
That itself is a prayer, because submitting the human will to supreme will, that's the struggle everyone has. Everyone in flesh has that struggle. Submitting the human flesh to the superior will of the Father. So in that, Jesus had his struggle.
So when you say Father,
there,
do you mean
there,
God?
there
I want to
is-
understand that. When you mean
Hold on.
Father, can you clarify that, please?
Yeah.
What do you mean when you say Father?
Father, Jesus was praying to God.
So Jesus, okay, thank you.
Yeah. So in his human flesh, when there is a struggle between obeying the will of the Father and having the comfort which he is able to get, like if he wants to live in human flesh, he could live. He would just ask his Father to send a legion of angels and destroy everybody, right? But that is not the final purpose which he came for. That is where submitting his will, the human will, the will of the Father comes. But what is the will of Jesus as God, as the Son of God, is to
When you
be
say as
in
God-
oneness, with the will of the Father to which he submits.
I don't know how it says in your Bible, but in my translation, in Mark chapter 14, verse number 33, it says, he took with him Peter, James, and John, and became troubled and distressed. And then he said to them, my soul is sorrowful even to death. Remain here and keep watch. He advanced a little and fell to the ground and prayed that
If it were possible.
that if it were possible for the hour might pass by him. And he said, Abba, Father, all things are possible. Take this cup away from me, but not what I will, but what you will. So he prays for the hour to pass away from him.
Yeah.
In Mark 35, 14:35, fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible that the hour might. In John 12:27, he says, now my soul is troubled, and what should I pray?
Sorry, just jump in.
I just made this my final verse. He says, I am troubled now, and yet what should I say? Father, save me from this hour. Meaning, should I pray, Father, save me from this hour? But it is for this purpose that I came to this hour. So Jesus says he will not pray for the hour to pass away. But in Mark 14:35, he prays for the hour to pass away from him. So John has a different emphasis.
But the cup to pass away.
Yeah. So in Mark 14:35, I'll just show you very quickly because you have to go. So here it says, he advanced a little and fell to the ground and prayed if it were possible the hour might pass. But in John 12, he says, should I pray, Father, save me from this hour? No, it is for this reason that I've come. So he says he will not pray for the hour to pass. But in Mark, he does pray for the hour to pass away from him.
So Yeah, in his human nature, it is okay. But his will was always
Do you believe he's one person or two persons? Do you believe Jesus is one person or two persons?
one Jesus.
Yeah, as one person?
One person.
Yeah, so if he's one person, then either he prayed for the hour to pass or he didn't pray for it to pass. So in John, he doesn't pray, and he even says he will not pray for the hour to pass. But in Mark, he does pray for the hour to
But
pass away.
I will look it in.
Okay, I'll think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and to me, in his human nature, it is like
But you also
submitting the
believe
will of
he's-
the flesh, submitting the will of the flesh to the will of the Father. That's a struggle.
But he's
That's
one
the
person.
Yeah.
He's not two persons.
Yeah.
So the flesh is one person.
Flesh is one person. So for me to do right or wrong, my tendency will be to do sin. But I have to crucify the flesh or crucify the will of the flesh. I have to say no to the will of the flesh to do what is right. So it is still me, one person.
But in his flesh, he says, I will not pray for the hour to pass.
Yeah.
But in Mark, he does pray.
I will look that.
Okay.
Also look into.
Do you want to write down the reference?
Yes.
Yeah, I will. I know the
Okay.
reference.
Also, I have a question. For example,
No, we are just closing the
is
conversation.
Jesus all-knowing?
Yeah, maybe we'll speak again another time.
Another time.
Because your friends are waiting for you. So, okay. Cool. Thanks anyway. Yeah.
What I would say is just trust in what Jesus said.
Okay.
And that would reject your Quran. And I would ask you to,
By trusting
seek the
in
truth.
Jesus.
When you seek the truth,
We know
and find
Jesus
it.
was a
Because
messenger.
Jesus said when you believe in Jesus, you will have eternal life.
No, we do
And
believe in
there
Jesus
is
as a
only one
messenger.
way to eternal life, and He is Jesus Christ alone.
He said eternal life. He
We'll speak
reminds
again.
me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he reminds me.